The Fantasmagorium show is proud to present Money, Murder, and Minnesota, a retrospective and review of all things Fargo. This week, we follow Gloria to Hollywood, California in search of Thaddeus Mowgli, and then back to Minnesota to shave a stash. The award-winning Coen Brothers executive-produced and Noah Hawley run FX series of Fargo is what we're here for. So let's go. Kat is here. I am Scotty R37, and Steve can help.
Indeed, he can. How apt, given Steve's affiliation with the channel at this point.
Well, and again, this is spoilers for Fargo season 3, episodes 3 and 4. And if you spoilers, and that is a reference to the animated robot from the science fiction story that I wasn't necessarily expecting. I don't know why I wasn't expecting it.
Yeah. As a pickup from last week, there were a couple things I wanted to mention.
Yes.
I thought it was really funny that when Cy first told Emmett that Varga has parked this tractor trailer under the freeway, or after he comes back to him later in the afternoon to talk about it, and he's like, and Emmett's like, well, what do you think's inside? And they're debating what this could be. Inside, the squarest person in the show, as square as they come, is like, slave girls. And then Emmett's eyes go wide. He's like, you think it's slave girls? And I'm like, these people are the most hapless idiots. It's like, I can't with these two people.
Well, it's kind of interesting because the show takes place in 2010, was released in 2017. So there are sort of things that have been alluded to that did not yet come to pass in terms of the world of the show. Like even with VM Vargas, he's talking about the 1% and the revolution that is on its way, a reference to Occupy Wall Street and the perils of. I love how ubiquitous Facebook is in this show or in this season, and it's like, oh yeah, no, everybody's got it. You got to get on it. Just there are references to these things, and then obviously with the trafficking of humans, that is something that has been more highlighted within the last, I would say, 7, 8, 10 years.
Well, as we'll get to it, that thing about Facebook is recurring theme throughout the season, the relationship between some of the people and technology. Which goes back to another thing I forgot to mention last week, is when Gloria follows up the tip of the guy who went to the liquor store and stole a page of the phone book. She goes there and she asks the clerk, so what do you know about this guy? He's like, well, he was Russian. He's like, no, he wasn't Russian. He was wearing a red T-shirt that said, love Russia. And it's like he said, and she gets the phone book and she sees that it's on a chain. And she's like, why is it on a chain? He's like, well, back in the 70s, people used to steal them. And I'm thinking, so fall 2010. So this is at least 31 years ago that this happened. And you're still going to the trouble of looping a chain onto drilling a hole through the corner of the phone book and looping a chain through there every time you get a new phone book. And it's like, somebody might steal it.
Well, and that's kind of like when you go to a bank and they have the pens with the little chain or what have you. But then, heck, I worked in a bank pre-2010, and we had already dispensed with the chained pens. I do want to say in the chat, hey, DVB, Citizen 333 Trip, how you doing, buddy? Good to see you. Thanks for hanging out. And DVB says, haven't watched this show. I'm just here to hear what Scotty will say next. Yeah, well, I will say things next, I promise. And DVV goes on to say, I've seen the Fargo movie, though. And this is a season that, I haven't seen season 2, and I am going through these for the first time in a wacky order. I really appreciate how the tone of the film of Fargo is present for most of the seasons. Uh, but also this doesn't feel like a direct, especially by the time we get to episode 3, and I can understand how it diverged to go to Kansas City in season 4, in that we can get out of Minnesota if we wish.
And that's interesting. This episode is the only one in the series where they go to another location, and the opening titles will say, "This is a true story," but this time it says the events depicted took place in Los Angeles, which they don't usually do when they leave, like for North Dakota or whatnot. I'm like, okay, that's kind of interesting. And this episode is called "The Law of Non-Contradiction" because there's a lot of paradoxical non-contradictions in this episode. So we begin with what's his name? Thaddeus Mobley, younger guy. You could tell this is back in the 70s. He's at the whatever the award that he got for best sci-fi author at the convention or whatever, and he's got
the Nimbus or something like that.
Yeah, something like that. And he's got the Rocket Award, and he goes to sit at the bar, and this guy walks up to him, played by Fred Melamed, and he presents himself as this great Hollywood producer, and he sweet talks him and says, and Thaddeus is really hapless because he's talking to him and he knows him by name. He's like, "How do you know that?" And he's like, and he points to the sign because his name's already been engraved on the trophy, and he's like, "You want like a beer?" And he's like, "No, I'll just take like a diet pop or something." It's like, okay. And he's like, "Oh, son, I want to make your book into a motion picture." And he takes him to this they go outside to take the picture that you saw that Gloria had from the newspaper article. And then he has him come to this screening room where you have this actress there, Vivian Lord. And, he's got a guy comes in and says, "Oh, there's a phone call for you, sir." Oh, he's like, "Oh, Warren Beatty." And talking about, "Blah, blah, I got the movie. Oh, yeah, the kid's writing the script right now, blah, blah, blah." And then he's like, "Well, we could write it, but we have some money issues." He's like, "Oh, I can give you an advance from my next, Thaddeus says, I can give you an advance from my next book." So we can see clearly that this is not, no, this man is a con. This is a con. We could tell that this guy is full of shit. But Thaddeus is hapless and kind of gullible, and so he just helps pay for it. And then we segue into this montage of him and Vivian living like the high life, and he goes to the producer's office where he's got a bunch of posters for what look like cheap B movies with her as the star in every single one. And he starts getting hooked on alcohol and drugs. And like one point he's at like a fancy restaurant, and this guy sits down next to him and hits the tab for the money, and he follows her back outside, and she's like, "Here, take this, it'll make the sex better." And so he's just getting totally put through the ringer of this ridiculous Hollywood lifestyle where he keeps cutting all these checks that he's getting, presumably because the producer is going to help him, and he starts believing that insofar that, oh, it's going to take us somewhere. But then the flashback stops, and it takes us back to the present. And Gloria has flown to is flying to Los Angeles on her own dime. And Donnie Mashman, her partner, he's like, "Well, the new chief isn't really going to like that." She's like, "Well, I'm doing it on my own dime anyway, so he's not going to, it doesn't matter whether you approve the time off or not." And when she's on the plane, she's sitting next to this guy, Paul Moraine, who's a pretty interesting character played by Ray Wise. And they have a nice conversation, and she tells him where she's going and what she's up to, and he finds that kind of interesting. And what is it that he told her on the plane?
This is my 6th flight this week. And it's
right.
It's only Tuesday.
Yeah. And so they have this nice little chat, and then they part ways. She gets off a bus at this hotel that's right down the street from the Chateau Marmont. Or like not a hotel, but a motel.
No, she gets the Hertz shuttle from the airport to the parking lot, and then she gets a rental car.
Yeah, gets the rent-a-car and is stuck in traffic for like a long time. She makes it to the motel, and she checks in, and the buzzer is plays like a Christmas song on it. "Oh, hey, lemon pie." And this guy comes in up to the desk. He's like, "Oh, are you here for the convention?" She's like, "What?" He's like, "Oh, there's a Santa convention." And you see these Santas all commingling outside or whatever. And she's like, "What made you think that?" "No." And he's like, "Oh, so you're here for by the hour then?" And she says no. And he realizes he shouldn't have said that. So he's like, "Oh, yeah, I'll get your room for the night or whatever." And as she's filling out like the paperwork, this Santa comes in and snatches her suitcase. And she's like, "Hey, stop!" And she chases him out into the street, but he gets away. And so she calls the cops. And in our next cameo from Always Sunny in Philadelphia, we have this time Rob McElhenney, who's basically playing the slightly more successful version of his character from Always Sunny, because at least he has a real job. He's like a cop, and he's like, "Oh, you're from Minnesota," and he starts like imitating her accent, and she gives the details. And he's like, "Huh, Santa? A Santa with elf stockings?" She's like, "Oh yeah, apparently there's a Santa convention. I don't know why they chose here." He's like, "Uh-huh." It's like, "Well, you're gonna find it. You think you'll find it?" He's like, "Don't get your hopes up, but I'll call you if I, find anything." He's like, "Oh yeah, maybe bring the luggage back." So she gets the key and goes into her motel room. She sees a pair of shoes kind of under one of the drapes, and she thinks there's somebody standing behind it. She pulls it aside, and there's nobody there. But what she does see on the counter is one of those useless machines that Marvin Minsky invented, a philosopher, and it's a joke where the sole function is to turn itself off. Where you hit the switch, and this part of the box opens up, and in this design, it's like a cat, like the reaching its paw out and hitting the switch again, so it closes off back inside, it shuts down. And it's, the philosophical joke about useless machines, and here's one that's only function is to turn itself back off again, which is, okay, that's kind of funny. We also at this point, I remember what I forgot to say. So we also saw at this point when she was on the plane, she's already started to read one of the sci-fi novels that Thaddeus Mobley wrote, The Planet Wind, and we saw the first animated segment in which a rocket crashes on a distant planet, and the astronaut's dying, and his robot can only say, "I can help, I can help." And he was like, "I need you to do," and he's not able to really finish his thought, and he dies. And so the robot starts walking along saying, "I can help." And that's when Paul Morena engaged her in conversation, because he saw that the title was, he's like, "Hey, the Y is spelled funny there." She's like, "Oh, it's just sci-fi." He's like, "What's it about?" And she's like, "Oh, it's a robot that's pondering the meaning of life, wandering through the universe aimlessly." And he was interested by that. So she's still trying to follow. So that night she goes to the bar because she got a call, and it turns out that the cop did indeed find her suitcase, but it's already been emptied out. And it's, the Rob McElhenney character, he's kind of a jerk. We could tell the only thing he's interested in is having a one-night stand with her, but she's too sweet to even, for that thought is clearly not even crossing her mind. And they're talking at the bar. He's like, "You want a couple beers? I'll get you a couple beers." And she's like, "No, I'll just have a diet pop." And he looks at her, he's like, "Huh?" And she's
diet pop, eh?
Yeah, the same thing which is interesting, because that's the same thing that Thaddeus Mobley said, even though they're not actually related. So I thought that was kind of funny. And he says, "I got to go drop the kids off at the pool," because he's getting annoyed that she's not really interested in engaging him. And he's like, "Oh, you're a family man." And he's like, "I'm going to go take a shit." I was like, because this guy's such a dick. So he leaves, and then by happenstance, she sees Paul Morena again. And they're like, "Oh, what are the odds?" And they're talking, and he tells her, and she tells him what she's really doing there, investigating possibly murder of her stepfather, and how it's like, it's not really going well. And so he tells her this story about a soldier who went off to war, and he signed this divorce decree saying that it will not go into effect until, if I don't come back in 12 months, then it will kick in, and you and I will be divorced. But it has a retroactive clause in it, meaning that it becomes active once it's signed, regardless of what it actually says, so that if he doesn't come back, it means you've been divorced for the previous year, even though the contract explicitly says you're not going to be divorced until 12 months has passed. So it's a contradiction that cannot be. And which, of course, relates to Gloria, because she's a police chief, but she's not a police chief. She has a police station, but it's not really a police station because it's from the library. It's like, oh, she's investigating her father, but he wasn't really the father's murder. You have the robot, which is really useful, but all it could do is say, "I can help." So you have all these different contradictions of things happening throughout this episode. And then we get to the next segment of the cartoon where the robot's wandering along haplessly, and these three thugs come and attack. And as they're trying to take what they can from the robot, all it can say is, "I can help, I can help," as they just use it and abuse it and kick it in the sand. And then all of a sudden this foreign invasion happens, and these alien creatures show up and start blasting everything away, and the robot can't do anything. He's just saying, "Oh, I can help," wandering around aimlessly. So meanwhile, Gloria follows up the next lead in the case. I can't remember what lead led her to the diner. Was it the newspaper clipping?
I am trying to remember what exactly it was that led her there, because obviously like she went to the hotel that was present in the photo, and so she goes there, and then I forget. No, I don't know how she found out where Vivian was.
Yeah, I missed that too. But anyway, she goes to a diner, which, by the way, is the same diner from The Big Lebowski. Fun
I
fact.
thought so.
It is. So she goes there, and Vivian Lord is working. And it's fun that they actually got. So the actress playing Vivian Lord in the flashbacks is Francesca Eastwood. And they got her real life mother, Frances Fisher, to play herself as older, which I thought was really cool.
That was
And
cool.
she's now a waitress at the diner. And Gloria's asking her about Thaddeus Mobley. She doesn't remember. She's like, "That was a fuzzy time for me." When? The 70s. And she's like, oh, "Okay." And she's like, "Well, you were mentioned there, pinup." He's like, "Lady, I was on everybody's wall back then." And she gestures up to the wall, and you see the picture. And she's like, "Okay, well, if you think of anything, here's my number, or you can call or whatever." So she leaves, and Gloria next decides to go to the Writers Guild of America, because it seems like the sensible place to go to find out about writers. But it turns out that they do not represent authors, or book authors. And she laughs and is like, "Well, that's an oversight." And this is a place, where you got to ding the bell, and the old lady comes up, and she's got to manually check through the papers because they don't have technology here, unlike the idiot, cop from the bar who's like, "You got the Facebook? Everybody's on the Facebooks," and she like doesn't know what that is. So you're seeing again this warring thing between those who are advocating technology and understand its benefits, those who advocate doing it the old-fashioned way, and then you have the idiots using technology for stupid things, whereas you have other people like Gloria who are doing their due diligence. And so she's able to find a script that Thaddeus Mobley wrote for one of his stories, and she sees that it says produced by Howard Zimmerman. So she tracks down Howard Zimmerman, which is the producer from the flashbacks, to this retirement home, like an assisted living facility, and she's allowed to go see him. They have a different actor playing him. I forgot he was actually a college professor that they got to play this role, philosophy professor or whatnot. And on the wall behind him, he's sitting like in a chair. He's not really. He looks like he's practically on his deathbed. He's has to talk with the voice box thing that he holds up to his throat. And behind him on the wall, there's a sign that says Plorexia Pictures, which is a word that means extreme greed. So there's no subtlety here at all. And she's asking him if he remembers Thaddeus Mobley. He's like, "Oh yeah, you're darn right I remember him before all this happened." She's like, "Oh, you do? What was he?" "He was a failure is what he was." And he tells her the nature of the universe and how we're all just particles floating around. Sometimes you have collisions that are completely meaningless. Other times you're just, maybe it's your destiny. All this kind of, he's like, it's called quantum something, and he can't really figure out what it is. And she's kind of listening to this, and he's basically talking about, again, the meaning of life. It's like a parallel with the robot, I Can Help. And it's wandering through all of these things, and it's in a sense meaningless because it's like the robot debating not even so much the meaning of life, as he just has no real purpose. Which I Can Help, interestingly enough, is the first thing from season 1 when Gus Grimley's neighbor is telling the story about the rich guy who wanted to help everybody, and that's how he kept saying it, "I can help," where he kept thinking, "Oh, I can help." So it's like, okay, I could see that parallel. And so the Zimmerman is just talking about how nothing really matters in the universe, and you could go all your life trying to find something, and it really has no bearing on anything. So she figures this is useless, and she goes outside and asks one of the nurses about it. She's like, "Yeah, nobody really comes to see him, and there was an accident in the 70s. It was before my time, so I don't really know the circumstances, but they thought he was going to be a vegetable. It's a miracle that he lived." And that's when Gloria gets a phone call or no, she doesn't get the phone call yet, but we segue back into the flashback.
Yes.
And we see that what's happened is Thaddeus has become basically a drug addict. Virtually, he's out of money, and he goes back to Vivian's apartment, and she doesn't want to let him in, but he kind of barges in anyway, and he sees Zimmerman there, and he's angry. And so we can connect the dots that, okay, he's figured out that this guy's been basically conning him. And in a really surprising turn, Zimmerman tries to say, "Oh boy, you should be happy that we did this to you, because it could have been a lot worse, but now you've learned your lesson. It'll never happen," acting like they can go back to being friends. And he's just not having it, understandably. And so eventually it escalates, and Zimmerman puts Thaddeus in a headlock, and he's like, "Oh, you're gonna, you have to learn." And Vivian is kind of startled that he does this, but he eventually lets go of him. he collapses on the ground. He's like, and Zimmerman's like, okay, now we're gonna be being friends. It's over. We'll, bye bye. And understandably, Thaddeus is pissed off, so he grabs Zimmerman's cane, whacks him across the face, right when Zimmerman's like, you're a really good kid, and then bam, it's just bashing him in, and Vivian eventually gets terrified. She's like, stop, to pull him off, and he just elbows her really hard, slams her onto the ground, and he's about to go in like he's gonna kill her, and she shields herself from it, and he finally stops himself, and he's like, you're a bad person, and he drops it and takes off like a jackrabbit. He's gone. And then the flashback segues back to Vivian Lord, the older Vivian Lord at the diner, and apparently she called Gloria back and told her the story. And Gloria's like, oh, okay. So do you think it's possible that Zimmerman maybe wanted revenge and hired somebody? And then she just stops herself, and she's like, no, this has nothing to do with anything. This is just a meaningless thing. Like Zimmerman said, collisions and things happen, and it had nothing to do with why he was murdered. And Vivian kind of sadly says, Thaddeus was right. I am a bad person. And she feels like really bad about it. And Gloria doesn't say anything, but she doesn't look judgmental at all. And she just walks away. And then it segues back into the cartoon again, where we see the end of the story where the robot is finally found and rescued by this advanced civilization, which says, you've been alive for 2.5 million years, and you are the oldest, longest living sentient being in the world. And we thank you for all of your millennia of recorded history and information. And it's like, but I can help. Well, you could turn yourself off now. And so he just turns himself off, saying, I can help, as he does it. And he shuts down. And Gloria goes back to her motel, and she's getting ready to leave, and she sees the the useless machine again that she's looking at, and realizes that her life, this journey, is basically a parable of that robot. This whole odyssey had nothing to do with anything really. And then it segues again into the next flashback where Ennis arrives back at the motel room, and we see that it's actually the same one that Gloria is in. And he goes to vomit in the toilet, and he looks up and he sees stamped on the inside of the toilet, Dennis Stussy and Sons, but the D is kind of faded. And so, okay, that's kind of sad that he got his name off of toilet, but he's not. Like we notice, he's a very grumpy guy in the future. And then Gloria sees that too, and she's picking up something off the bathroom floor, and she's figured it out as well. And she flies back to Minnesota, and Donnie, she goes to meet with her son, who, by the way, I found it funny that at one point she calls her son to see how he's doing while she's gone. And Donnie has pulled over the school bus with the siren to get him on the phone because they don't have cell phones because they're practically Luddites. And she's like, oh yeah, Dale gave me an Xbox. She's like, really? That was going to be your Christmas present. Well, he says sometimes we should have everyday presents too, which I interpreted that being more, well, your stepfather, your grandpa was, murdered. So we'll give you, something to take your mind off of it.
Sure.
And Donnie brings Gloria the news that they got fingerprints from the house, from Stussy's house, and it matches this con, Maurice LaFay. And she's like, well, we'll go up there after we go to Arby's or whatever. And he's like, no, he's dead. And she's like, what? And he's like, yeah, AC unit fell and killed him, freak accident. She's like, an AC in winter? And Donnie's like, yeah, even I was thinking that was kind of strange. And she's like, well, he's dead. He's not going anywhere. So how about we table this discussion for later and go to Arby's? And I love how Donnie's just getting super excited. He's like, oh, yeah, we're going to Arby's. Like, this is a big thing. And they drive off, and that's the end of the episode.
Yeah.
And so I like that, again, we're seeing all again, they're doing the whole, technology being useful, technology being useless, and the other contradictions that it turns out her father's name wasn't even Emmett Stussy. It was Thaddeus Mobley. So per the law of non-contradiction, she's a police chief, but she's not a police chief. Works in a station, but she doesn't. She's a stepfather, but he's not. His name is Stussy, but it isn't. And Howard Zimmerman, he's a producer, but he isn't. And so Vivian, who apparently is a legit pinup girl, she has her photos and stuff, like she says, all over town, but she's not an actress. So it seems to be an episode that's more or less summing up the themes of the season, and you could see how the cartoon, like, pick which character you think is who, like who's the one telling Gloria to shut off, versus Gloria, of course, being the robot trying to help and trying to solve this thing. And a lot of people praised it because it's like, wow, you're departing the normal tropes of the show to do something entirely different. And then the whole animation style. Like, what do you think about this whole thing?
Well, with the animation style, originally, from what I understand, it was supposed to be Don Hertzfeldt, who did, I don't know if you've seen it. He did a bunch of shorts, and the one that I remember the most is my spoon is too big, and it's all just very surrealistic nonsense. And it was originally asked to be written and animated. It was going to be 23 minutes long, interspersed throughout the season. And Don Hertzfeldt said, unfortunately, that he wouldn't be able to do it in the time allotted, and so it was truncated for just this one episode. And I don't even think that Don Hertzfeldt did actually do the production on it, but it was produced in in his style, and so it was. Now, one thing that I did like, I loved the sort of bittersweet nature of the story, like the story of the abandoned robot who has no purposes, and I can help, but I didn't know who the voice of the robot was, and it makes more sense for it to be Gloria. But I was thinking it might have been Mary Elizabeth Winstead, because Mary Elizabeth Winstead, the Thewlis fella, and Ewan McGregor. What's Mr. Thewlis's first name?
David
Thewlis. David Thewlis is the voice of the supreme alien who tells the robot to turn off. And Ewan McGregor is the voice of the astronaut at the beginning who dies. And so I was trying to piece together, and I was thinking maybe it was going to be Mary Elizabeth Winstead as the robot, but it makes more sense thematically for it to be Carrie Coon.
Yeah, because that's kind of the journey. She's just this whole odyssey she's been on in Los Angeles, where she meets all these other people, finds out about these misdeeds. And okay, it's an interesting story, but like she says, it's just a story, and it doesn't really, amount to anything. Which when she says that to, oh wow, thank you, Eugene Bird, very generous.
Eugene Bird, thank you. You are too kind, and it's a it's a small cat holding a trophy, and so thank you so much.
Nice.
How apropos post Oscars.
And so when when Gloria tells Vivian Lord at the end that, oh, it's just a story, which is like a double entendre, because it's like, yeah, it's meaningless to her investigation, but because it's a story, it's not like any charges are going to be brought against anybody anymore. It's like it's over. And so it's kind of like, it's like, is it foreshadowing what's going to happen in the season? Is it not? Is it misleading? And there's certainly a lot to be said about that from the way the next episode starts. But this one is very, again, it was very intriguing the way it just, and how Ray Wise just shows up as, Paul Moraine to tell this great parable just for the sake of telling the parable of the story. And so it's like, okay. And again, just portraying the whole different universes. Like, she's from small town Minnesota, simple Minnesota cop, simple Minnesota values, who doesn't understand what's going on in Los Angeles, even with something as ill-advised. Oh, you're going to stay in the motel for an hourly rate then? It's like, no. And being too thick to see that the cop just wants a one-night stand. And, it's just, again, so like you're in like a Babe in the Woods type thing, like this robot wandering through the hellscape of this weird dystopic place and doesn't really know how to, just wants to do the right thing and help people out. But everybody she kind of meets is kind of adversarial in a way. Like the lady at the Writers Guild was kind of giving her scuff and kind of like annoyed with her. It's like you get a lot of people coming and buzzing your bell every day, lady. It's like, come on.
No, but I think it's a juxtaposition of it's not Eden Prairie, Eden Valley being the small town versus, and like, I've seen Jackie Brown. It's like, oh no, we got her in Compton. I just told her it was Hollywood. It's like, Hollywood is not the glamorous place that you would think it was going to be when you get there, is it?
I've never been there, but I know.
That's what I've heard. Like, I've never been there, but I've heard when you think of Hollywood, it's all glitz and glam. But when you get there, it is not. It is
No.
not that at all. And so I find her fish out of water nature, but no nonsense sort of attitude great. She's not intimidated by the big city. She
Mm.
just she's still conducting her investigations and doing so in a very pragmatic way. But yeah, like whenever she comes into contact with anybody, it's all stonewall, mind your own business, leave me alone. And that being the opposite of how you would feel, or at least how, as an audience, we have felt anytime that we've been in Minnesota because of, well, Minnesota nice. No one here is Minnesota nice.
Right. Even when the cop was kind of making fun of her, like, oh, Minnesota, she doesn't even pick up that he was kind of making a mean joke. She's just kind of, yeah, like, she's like, oh, yeah, you know the place, you know?
Yeah.
It's like, oh, geez, here we go. But yeah, I thought it was just neat. Yeah.
I do want to react to Eugene Bird saying, I don't understand how she stole Ewan away from his wife. Mary's not hot or exciting, really, is she? I think I'm a fan from Death Proof to Ramona Flowers. I've been a fan of Mary Elizabeth Winstead pretty much every time I've seen her.
I don't know enough of the backstory to comment.
I don't know anything about Ewan's first wife.
I can't remember. She wasn't a celebrity, but okay, I don't remember if there were already on Rock. Whatever. I'm not the one that I don't know anything about whether
No,
that was on the rocks or not before he met Mary and had the before they met on the set of the show or not. I don't know.
well, I think I brought it up last week, and I know that it was somewhat of a scandal. But then there's a Gentleman in Moscow, the new show that's on Paramount Plus that's coming out, and they're in that together as well. So from what I understand, they're very happy. But it is unfortunate that there had to be heartbreak on the way to happiness. But
Funny, that's another very meta thing that happens in the next episode as well.
oh, I know we're spoiling everything, and I'm just like, no spoilers for the show from 2017. Speaking of which, DVB says, I got to check this show out. Lemon says, hello. And Lemon's recommendation is check out season 1 and 2 for sure. Season 1, I thought was great. I'm definitely looking forward to season 2 based on the high marks that I've been told. And Kat, that's your favorite. And so I'm looking forward to that. I would even say, like, going forward, it's interesting. If not for the storytelling, then certainly even the duller and just not as vibrant as seasons 1, 2, and 3. Even the performances in seasons 4 and 5 are engaging. The characters are engaging. I think 5 is better than 4, but yeah. I would recommend, I would celebrate. And Lemon, yeah, you're absolutely right, says, I'm getting the impression that Scotty loves this season 3 as well. Yeah. Well, yeah. I enjoy the crime thriller. I enjoy the casts, like Michael Stuhlbarg. Stuhlbarg. He's like, everybody is great. David Thewlis, like everybody who's been popping up, and I thought it was getting Rob McElhenney and the mom from Titanic and Clint Eastwood's daughter. Like, I know that it was her daughter, but whatever. And it's always surprising and pleasant just to run into the people who have been sort of tapped to be in the show. I recommend it. Lemon says season 1 is good. Season 2 I describe as Fargo prawn. Action. Can't wait to see it.
Mm-hmm.
Lemon Pie says diet pop, eh? What's wrong with you, eh? It's true. And in the awards, he wants a cream soda. I thought that because then in the episode coming up, that's what Emmett has.
Yeah. Or Ray.
Lemon Pie says Scotty is in pre-PBR state. Yeah. Hey, man, that's the funny thing. I may have a reputation that precedes myself, but it's not entirely accurate. DVP says, funny how different parts of the U.S. call it soda rather than pop. I'm in Canada. We call it pop. But then I've heard in like South Winnipeg near the Dakotas, I don't know, they might call it soda. Oh, wait, here we go. Here in Washington, we call it pop. Yeah. And then Lemon says we call it soda here.
Mm-hmm.
At least the cool people do. And DVB goes on to say, I could go for a lemon soda right about now, a Texas-sized one. Lemonade with carbonation in a huge cup. There's a little bit of romance going on. And I appreciate the enthusiasm for Arby's. There was a joke that I heard a little while ago, actually a long while ago, and it was like, I'm thinking Arby's, because that used to be the what do you call it? The not tagline, the motto or whatever for Arby's. And the joke was from a stand-up comedian that says, if you're thinking Arby's, I'm thinking you don't get to choose where we eat anymore. And so
which is all the way why it's funnier that Donnie is just excited for Arby's all the time.
Yeah. Ooh, you guys are gonna get Arby's? And thank you for reminding. Eugene Bird says, Happy Pie Day, Pie. And to everyone else, I would hope. And in reference to Hollywood, Eugene Bird says, welcome to the jungle, they say about it, which makes sense. But I'm sheltered. I don't know what I would do in Hollywood. I don't think I would. I think I'd have my luggage stolen. DVB says, Hollywood looks better on screen than in real life. That's what I've heard.
Well, here's the thing, is that most of the studios are in Burbank, which is on the other side of the hills. All of the expensive houses up in the hills, the neighborhoods look really nice, but they still got to drive down the hill to, the proper Hollywood proper, where you have, all the same type of regular businesses and seedy motel and all that kind of stuff. And you meet all the people who are always cosplaying near like Grauman's Chinese Theater, near the Egyptian, near El Capitan, and that whole section of Sunset Boulevard where they kind of creepy weird stuff going on you don't want to be necessarily around. And so it's very it's very much like what you saw when Gloria's at the motel. Like I mentioned, the Chateau Marmont's a really nice place, but it's like right up down the road in the middle of that type of stuff. It's not, kind of like when I went to the Winchester Mystery House for the first time in San Jose. The house and grounds are gorgeous, or at least the outside of the house and grounds are gorgeous, but it's not in a great part of town, really run down, seedy, kind of like, I remember when Walt Disney, for instance, bought the land for Disneyland, he bought out the red light district to bulldoze it because he wanted to make it a more family-friendly area, and not as, seedy. But people forget, it's like, Hollywood doesn't, most of the studios aren't there. I mean, there is maybe some studio offices, but prime real estate and stuff for that is mostly in Burbank. And then there's some other, like, blue screen type studios and stuff down near Manhattan Beach. But Hollywood proper is kind of, where you have things like the Dolby Theater or the Kodak Theater where they do the various award shows. But otherwise those are like hotels year round and stuff. It's not, it's not a glitz and glamour spot, even though you do have some fancy restaurants and stuff along the way. But yeah. The Vizard.
Someday I'll get there.
This whole season of about, stories, and it's like you mentioned, what is the story of Hollywood? Oh, it's this glitz and glamour place, but is it really?
Herc130 says, running late, guys. Hello, panel. Hello, DVB, Lemon, and Eugene. Good to see you, Herc. Nice to see you, Flyboy. And Edge of Time. Greetings from the Edge of Time. Hail to Edge of Time.
Hail.
Lemon Pie says, Scotty has a reputation. Yes, an excellent one. And it looks like DVB has been to the Winchester Mystery House as well.
Yeah, it's interesting. The inside has mostly this peach colored brown for the main walls, and then there's a lot of pastel-y like colors. And it's interesting to hear the history of it, but there's not as much weird stuff about it as you would think. Like the travel shows like to highlight the weird stuff, but they're usually only like 15 minutes because there's really not that much weird about it. It's a couple doors that go to nowhere, a couple weird cut size ramps. And then like when you're looking over the balustrade to look down below, instead of seeing it, they would have a pair of French doors, almost like they open upwards instead just to look down. It was just kind of, so there's a couple weird things, but mostly it's just big. It's like, okay. But yeah, it is amazing. And the grounds look impeccable. It's in seeing the outside of it, it's like, wow, this is something out of like, it does feel like it's from, early 20th century or late 19th century style. Like they kept it that way. So that's really cool.
That is awesome. Edge of Time says, I think of it as arbage. Rhymes with garbage. America's roast beef? No, sir.
Oh God, I have a story. We drove up going down to LA, and we tried, up the 5, and there's not many places to stop. And we went to Arby's once, and the food there, it was like they were using crappy lunch meat from some Lunchables type. It did not taste good at all. I'm like, ugh. I went next door and got something from Jack in the Box as a palate cleanser for the ride further up the road because it's like, this is not good. And which is why I thought it was all the funnier when I'd see Donnie getting excited about, Arby's getting like, I'm like, that's really sad. Is that the most exciting thing in this town? Maybe. But I do know that Eden Prairie is also not Eden Prairie, but St. Cloud, where the Stussy Lots building is, their headquarters. That is where they P-51 Mustang factory there, where they build them and refurbish them there, which I thought was kind of neat to find out. So there are other things to do there to see.
Well, in Eden Prairie, obviously, it had the Mall of America, I think, because that's.
I've seen pictures. Nothing about it makes me think that I'd want to go there, like fly out of my way to go visit the Mall of America.
Well, and I don't think it's there anymore, but Eden Prairie Mall is where they filmed the Mallrats.
Right.
Yeah.
And then Eden Valley, Mystery Science Theater 3000. Awesome.
Oh, nice. See? Eugene Bird has a question. A little bit of flattery, but that's okay. Scotty is a born entertainer. He could make it there if anybody here could. How did Kat meet him? How did we meet Kat?
Robert Meyer Burnett on his channel, The Burnett Work, was hosting a free New Year's Eve Zoom party. It was December 31st, 2020. And the Richard was mediating the call where people would get like 10 minutes to talk to Rob and so forth. And Scott was like several PBRs deep and just kept interrupting everybody. It was hilarious. And then Richard eventually kicked him off the call. And about 3 weeks later, and I thought it was really funny when you kept coming in like, yeah, this guy's awesome. And about 3 weeks later, the Richard did a watch along in the Burnett Work Facebook group for The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. And Scott and I were the only two to show up besides Richard. And, we've seen this movie a million times. And so Scott and I are just, shooting the shit the whole time the movie's on. And Richard kept getting annoyed because we weren't watching the movie. It's like, Richard, anybody who hasn't seen this movie is not going to watch it on a crappy Facebook watch along window for the first time. So we just had fun, and that's where we met.
The way Sergio Leone intended, watching it on your phone.
Yeah.
Herc says Chateau Marmont has many, many stories, like the one time the owner was married to Al Ruddy, who came up with Hogan's Heroes and was the producer for The Godfather, Longest Yard, $1 Million Baby. Huh. Mm-hmm. That's cool. Yep. DVB totally agrees with you. And Edge of Time says, Scotty has a reputation for loving cake. Cannot confirm. Lemon can confirm. I am a big fan of Twinkies. They are snack cakes. DJ Play Nice, pleasure to see you, DJ Play Nice. Stop by to say hello and bump the algorithm. Hope you guys have a great night. You as well, DJ Play Nice. Thank you. DVB says Sarah Winchester was superstitious. She thought she was building the mansion for ghosts that were haunting her. All of the ghosts killed by the Winchester rifle. Is that? I feel like I've heard that.
Yeah, well, because she was married to him, the guy, the Winchester, who founded the Winchester Rifle Company, and when he died, she was paranoid and thought there was some type of curse because then her son died as well. And so she thought she was cursed as a result of, profiting off of these guns, which were used to kill so many people. And so some spirit medium person, con artists as they are, told her that, oh, well, these ghosts, if you just build them accommodations, they'll stop bothering you. So her thought process was, I'll build this house and I'll deliberately make it confusing for the ghosts so they get lost inside and they won't be able to bother me. And then she just kept building and building and building. And when she finally died, like 30 years later into the construction, or 27 years, however long it was, they just finally stopped building it. And then the city bought it to use it as a museum because it's really nice. And there's a story that Teddy Roosevelt, when he was president, came to see her. And the gardener out front, who didn't know it was Teddy Roosevelt, he's like, "Hey man, no outsiders, get the hell out of here," type of thing. He was so offended he left and he didn't come back.
Oh my stars. Suzanne Eckstein is here. Hey Suzanne, good to see you. Thank you so much. And when you guys are saying hello to each other, I hope you don't feel that I am ignoring the chats. I just figured that the appropriate parties are meeting and saying hello. So
Yes.
I don't mean to be dismissive, but hello to all, and all to had said hello to each other. And there we go. Suzanne Eckstein, thank you for being here, and thank you everybody else
ready
for
to move on to the fourth episode.
Let's do episode 2 or episode 4. Episode 4.
So this episode continues the motif of the other sequel seasons, where they have a character from a preceding season come back as narrator. We have this time Billy Bob Thornton reprising his role as Lord Malvo. Yes. This time he's narrating the story of Peter and the Wolf, a classic story about the Soviet young pioneer Peter, young pioneer being the Soviet version of Boy Scouts. And it's a story where they're trying to promote the Soviet way, and Peter's grandfather, the old non-Bolshevik, he's the old traditionalist, we can't listen to him. And so Malvo is talking about how, in the story there's a different instrument for each character, and we get to see which character represents which character in Peter and the Wolf, the story. So we begin with the bird, who is Emmett Stussy, as he's played by the flute, as he's going through all of his ties. We then see the duck, played by his brother Ray, which is by the oboe. We see the cat, which is Nikki Swango. And then we see
the clarinet.
She's the clarinet. We see grandfather, who is Cy, played by the I can't remember all the instruments off the top of my head, but
that's okay. It's fine.
Yeah, we see Cy, who's definitely the grandfather, old-fashioned traditionalist who wants to warn about the wolf. We then see the blast of the hunter's shotguns, which is Yuri Gurka, the Varga's muscle. We then see an interesting one, the wolf, who's Varga, and I say interesting because in the clip you see him sitting at the at this table getting course after course after course of food, and then he goes in the bathroom to vomit because he's bulimic, which is why his teeth are so horrible. And isn't it great that we have a bulimic wolf in this story? And then we have, of course, Peter, who is Gloria, represented by the strings. Now we can see that some people might initially think that, this is spoilers because we know what happens to the characters of Peter the Wolf. Well, not necessarily, because we see that there's differences set up off the bat, such as Cy is not Gloria's grandfather or doesn't have any relationship with Gloria. The hunter, the blast of the hunter shotguns, well, Yuri is in league with Varga, and Varga's the wolf, and so he's the hunter, so that doesn't really track. But thematically, you kind of get the idea. Like, Yuri's the muscle. He carries that thing around with him, that whip or whatever, all the time. Cy is the old-fashioned traditionalist who's the one who's a little bit smarter than Emmett, and then he's warning him about Varga. We have to be worried about this. Varga's definitely a wolf. Gloria, of course, is Peter. She's determined to solve the case. I'm going to do it by any means necessary. Ray, unfortunately, is the duck, kind of the hapless, stupid duck. Swango is most definitely the cat, the feline, who's also a bit of a predator herself. And yes, Emmett would be the simple bird in this story. What did you think when you saw this, the way they opened this episode?
I was under the impression that it was going to be a tonal sort of acoustic accompaniment with these characters for this episode alone. I don't know if it carries forth into further subsequent episodes. I like it because I'm a big fan of that particular that musical accompaniment. Although the one thing that every time I hear the theme for Peter with the strings, I always think of Joy from Blade Runner 2049, because that's the sound of her emitter turning on. And so I was like, what? It used to be my ring. Like, I'd get notifications with that. And so while I was watching the episode, I was like, no, that's a different phone. But no, I enjoyed it. And also just in terms of getting, I like. Do you think it was Malvo, or do you think I just thought of it as being an ominous performance by Billy Bob Thornton? But I really did
I
enjoy
guess
the music.
because we had Jason Schwartzman narrate that episode about the tiger in season 5 when he's talking about Dot, and
Right.
then I can't remember who they did that for season 4. I assume they did it. I can't remember because see, that's how forgetful that season is to me, even though I just watched it. Season 2 they do Lester, but this season I guess it's just Billy Bob Thornton. He's just credited as the narrator, but in Fargo terms, we get that he is Malvo. But I still like the idea that since Malvo is the devil, essentially, that he's narrating the story of Peter and the wolf, and as the narrator, he knows how the story is going to end. Or it's that kind of implication, even though it's not, again, not a direct comparison. Much like you pointed out with the cartoon, where Varga's the voice of the robot, the alien overlord or whatever, but he's not really affiliated with Gloria, not in a position to tell Gloria to shut down or anything like that.
Right.
So that's kind of a neat little parallel how it starts. One of the things
I did want to say hello to Mikey Suze 4. It's good to see you.
Hello.
And yeah, I just wanted to make sure that I addressed Mikey. So
we saw that the thing that Ray was doing at the start of this episode is Nikki has come up with this brilliant idea that he should get clean shaven and put on a wig and disguise himself as his brother, because one of the things Nikki stole from Emmett's desk was the receipt for the safety deposit box, and she assumes that's where the stamp is, and she's still obsessed with Ray getting his chi back in line so that they can win all these tournaments, because they apparently have sponsors lined up now. So she sends him to the bank, and they drive down there, and she's like, remember, the richest guy is the one who's the most powerful man in the room. He's like, okay, got it. And Ray walks in, and the first thing that happens is this new secretary comes to greet him, and she's asking for his ID, how can I help you, whatever. And then the bank manager comes, and he's kind of upset. He's like, oh, come on, what are you talking about? This is Emmett says this is one of our best guys, blah, blah, blah. And she's like, oh, sorry, I just been transferred down from Fargo or wherever she's from.
Bemidji,
that's right, Bemidji from season 1. She's just been transferred down from Bemidji. And Ray is like, oh, no, it's okay. We've all had a first day. And then she's like, oh, thank you. And the bank manager's like, what are you doing? Get the man a cream soda, which is Emmett's preferred drink, apparently. So he goes into the office with the bank manager asking, oh, how can I help you today, ES, as he calls them, because they're on those terms. And he says, well, I need access to my safety deposit box. Okay. Well, but I don't have the key is the thing. Oh, well, that's a little harder. Well, I need it today. And initially the bank manager's like, well, we can't really do it today, but we'd have to otherwise bring somebody down to drill it open. But, we're going to do and Ray almost lets the bank manager talk him out of doing that. And he's getting up to leave just as the secretary brings the cream soda, and she apologizes again. He's like, oh, you don't have to be sorry. But then he gets like that little light bulb goes off, and he remembers what Nikki told him, that the guy with the biggest money has the most power in the room. So then he threatens to close all his accounts and take his money down the street to Chase. And the bank manager's like, oh, no, we could just do this. And he's like, look, if I wanted an opinion from an asshole, I would ask my own. And you can tell this is really off brand for him. And so the bank manager concedes and has the lockbox drilled open, and he gives it to Ray. And Ray opens it, and it's just the ashes of the family dog. There's no stamp. But he uses the opportunity while he's there to withdraw $10,000. And he gets back in the car with Nikki, and he tells her what happened. And she's like, how much money did he have in there? Well, probably $1 million. And you only took $10,000. Like, now you got to abandon those old thinking criminal ways. This is about the value of the stamp, which is surprising. That I guess that the implication is that Emmett started his business with just $10,000, because that's what the stamp, I suppose, was originally worth. And she's like, okay, whatever. And she just kind of accepts that, and they drive off. And Cy, of course, has heard about this and reports it to Emmett. And he's like, you did what? And it's like, okay, that's really, above and beyond. And sure enough, when Ray goes back to work, he goes back to work thinking things are going to be fine. Gloria, meanwhile, sits down with her boss. And Mo wants to find out, why did you go to LA? She's like, well, that wasn't on the department's. It's like, you still didn't get permission to go. And he's like, look, I get this is personal for you, but this is a simple thing. The guy's he's a con with a rap sheet as long as your arm. He just is driving around drunk or whatever, and he just broke into to burgle a house. It's not it's not the crime of the century. It's not a brilliant. You don't need Sherlock Holmes to solve this. Is basically what he's saying. And she's like, but why did he rip the phone? The page out of the phone book then that had his name on it, that had Stussy's name on it. He's like, there you go, using 3-syllable words for a 2-syllable problem, for a 1-syllable problem. She's like, actually, that was 2 syllables. And then he starts telling war stories about guys like you in Fallujah, and you know what an IED is, and he's making the point that shit happens, things that aren't planned. Like, yeah, you run over an IED and it changes your entire life. It's not. It's like he's trying to get her to let this go and just let us close the case. But you can tell there are shades of the Bill Oswalt character from season 1 in terms of incompetence, except in Oswalt's case, it was him being such a good-hearted person, he couldn't imagine that people to be evil and didn't want to think it. Whereas this guy, he seemed smart to begin with because he was the one telling her, "What you don't understand that they don't use telex anymore. You don't. Your holding cell is a broom closet in the library. Is it you haven't unboxed the computers to check the databases and enter information?" But now he's, in a sense, kind of rolling back a bit and is advocating not investigating and advocating being lazy.
Well, okay. I have a perspective on this because I very much enjoy Shea Wingham as Chief Damick. And first things first, he's given me echoes of Walter from The Big Lebowski, because we have had echoes of other Coen brothers movies, and it's like, damn it, Walter, not everything has to do with Vietnam. And that was the thing. It's like, I knew guys like you in the service. And he does have a point, and she is flagrantly like just insubordinate. She's just like, I'm going to do whatever I'm going to do because this needs more. But you have to understand from his perspective, they haven't opened the computers. It's all just sort of like backwater, not backwater, but just very small town police work. But when you got the body of the guy who we have fingerprints of in the house, he killed that guy. We can pretty much wrap that up. And Gloria is like, but why? Like, how did this happen? And that's when he's just like, who cares? And so I do appreciate Gloria going forward, but also, like, as when you have well-written characters, even if they're not completely on the up and up, at least they have a point. Well, and the point is the killer is dead. We're cops. It's done.
Right. He said cosmic justice. But here's the thing. Yeah. Even an idiot like Donnie Mashman was smart enough to be suspicious that an AC unit just fell out of a window in the middle of winter. It was tampering with an AC unit. Even he was smart enough to put that together. And like Gloria says, to your point, Chief Damick, okay, he's an idiot driving around drunk, robbing somebody's house. Why did he drive 30 miles out of his way to do this and get the phone book? And he doesn't want to hear it. And it's like, again, you don't need to be Sherlock Holmes to see that there's something suspicious here. He deliberately tore the page out of the phone book that had Stussy's address on it. And he goes to that house, again, 30 miles away from plenty of other places he could have hit in town. And this guy is not a Wile E. Coyote super genius type criminal. So Damick is just like, trying to, I don't care. Let's move on. Let's finish the transition. The transition of power.
Well, and that is primarily what he is focused upon. He's like, now that we have this sort of swept away, we've got this all cleaned up, nice and neat. Now let's deal with the whole the transition of power. So yeah, he does have ulterior motives.
Yes. So meanwhile, Gloria decides, contrary to what Mo told her, that she's going to follow it up anyway. So she goes to the police station, and as she's walking in, Nikki is going out. And I like how they played the instruments again, where the strings are playing when she's on her way in, and then the clarinet starts playing as Nikki walks by, which is great. Yeah. So Gloria goes in to meet Ray, and she's immediately struck that his name is Stussy. And he's like, yeah, common name. I have cousins, and a lot of them I don't meet. Maybe I am related to this guy. I don't know. And she's like, yeah, I was asking about your convict, Maurice LeFay. And he's like, yeah, I heard that the AC unit fell on his head and ripped his brains open. She's like, yeah, I saw it. In fact, she did take a trip to the morgue, and they did show that kind of graphic, and I thought it was, I don't know, something funny about seeing him being literally brainless
Yeah.
on the slab. And so she's trying to piece together what happened, and he's like, yeah, he's trying to downplay it and, brush it away. It's not really a big deal, but she's not going to let him go of the fact that this guy's name is also Stussy. But when he tries to end the interview, she just decides to accept it and she leaves. First, she goes to the bathroom on her way out, and that's where she meets Winnie Lopez, who's a very chipper, very a small town cop as small town cop gets, in that she's so excited talking to Gloria after they meet in the bathroom. And she's like, oh, I'm working a fender bender, and blah, blah, oh, what are you doing? And she's like, well, Gloria's like, I'm working a murder. And she's like, oh, geez. I just laughed out loud because she has this very genuine response to hearing, oh my God, a murder. And I'm like, you're a cop. It's like, I get that this isn't a high murder area, but still, yeah. I mean, it's okay. That's kind of nice.
Well, she does reference the fact that LaFay had like later on, she references how LaFay had died, and it was strange because it was the most violent act that had happened in 18 months in this region.
And we also see the joke repeated where Gloria, when she entered the police station, the sensor for the automatic doors would not recognize her. She had to wait for somebody else to come walk through the door. And once again, she can't get the faucet to work when she's trying to wash her hands because it's an automatic faucet. And it's like, okay, so now it's like the person who has no interest in technology can't get technology to recognize her, which makes me think of, again, the robot, I can help, and nothing wanting to respond or interact with her. And she's trying to interact with the world, and it's not working either. So she leaves the police station, and she sees that Winnie has left a note on her windshield saying, oh, I saw your license plate, my lucky number, I'll try playing it tonight at bridge. She's like, oh my God, and like looking around. Which I thought was kind of funny. Ray, meanwhile, gets stopped by his boss while he's on his way out to go check on another parolee. And like, Ray, table that, we need you to come in here for a minute. And then we see a guy from internal affairs there. It's like, oh, this is serious. And they close the door, and they take out photographs from Emmett's 25th wedding anniversary, showing him and Ray and Nikki at the party. And I'm like, interesting. And he's like, oh, come on. And they're like, okay, Ray, if you tell us this is a one-time thing, it's fine. Because it's against the damn law, as the IA guy says. But Ray won't have it. He's like, no, I'm in love, and she loves me. And they're like, Ray, and he won't let it go. And then they're just like, fine, is that your final answer? Basically, he's like, well, you got 10 minutes to clean out your desk. And he's been fired. And it seems like they're not going to press charges so long as he leaves. And they're like, you're going to sign a waiver, making sure that promising that you're not going to sue us if you change your mind. And once the effect wears off, once you move beyond her, he's like, oh yeah, sure, I'll sign it. So much like the duck and the Peter and the wolf, like you said, the duck has paid for his stupidity. And then he leaves, and he's got his box of stuff, and he walks out in the parking lot, and we see Cy. Ugh. And we realize, Cy had the pictures taken, because even Cy was thinking ahead.
Oh, that
because Cy must have been thinking ahead about this, because again, why would anybody sneak into Emmett's wedding to take the pictures? They could just easily take the pictures from outside. And Cy points at him, like, yep, I did it. Like, he's the one who arranged it. It's like, okay, Cy did it. And then it just, again, so ridiculous seeing him do that standing in front of a Hummer, like he thinks he's so much more like intimidating. Like, yes, and he's not. And he just gets in his Hummer and drives away. And then we see that Ray's car has been also, has 2 boots on it, so he can't go anywhere. And so that's where Ray has found himself fired, preferring to be fired from a job that he needs because he's madly in love with Nikki, and vice versa. Nikki, meanwhile, has been waiting on him to show up at this, looks like a country club or something, where they're meeting potential sponsors for their competitive bridge.
Which I thought was sort of a kind of a punk move on his part, because I thought the reason that he felt comfortable saying, I love her, don't you know, was because he got the $10,000. He was on the phone with Nikki before, when when Gloria showed up, and basically he was like, well, we got sponsors. I don't even understand why wouldn't he back us? And so it seemed like the next they have plans. They've got big plans. And so I thought that he felt comfortable with it, but then he just, sort of punks out and goes to a bar to get hammered while he has other business to do. But I guess that's part of the reason why he is somewhat considered to be a loser by his more successful brother.
Yeah, and he's just probably doesn't have the courage to face Nikki yet to say, oh, by the way, I'm fired now. And yeah, I could have gotten a lot more money, which I could have used now that I've been fired, but I only got the 10 grand. So he's, washing and drowning away his sorrows. Meanwhile, Officer Lopez goes to Stussy Lots, and she goes to greet, she sits in a lobby, and Yuri comes to sit across from her, looking like really, hi. And then Mimo comes to sit by next to her in the other chair. And then Sai suddenly arrives. He's like, oh, Mr. Phelps, I'm here to talk to you. He's like, and he just says that like, nobody asked for that. Just great. And he leads her into the office, and she tells she's there about the fender bender, but that there's no intent to press charges. And she's like, well, I saw that a company car registered to this company, which makes it even funnier. This isn't Sai's personal car. He's used the money from the company to rent this car or to lease this car. And he doesn't want to say who drives the car because he doesn't want it to fall back on him.
Right.
And she's like, I take it that the Stussy whose car was damaged is brother of the Stussy who works here. And Sai doesn't even want to mention that because Yuri and Mimo are watching now from outside the window. And she's like, oh, no matter. And he's like, wait, didn't you say no charges are being pressed? So what's the issue? He's like, yeah, that was complainant 1. But complainant 2 was a waitress who just paid off her car. She was pretty upset about it. But that's an insurance matter. It would be, except the driver was a hit and run, took off at speed. He's like, oh, okay. So, they settle the matter for the time being. When he leaves, and Sai is really nervous because, that Yuri and Mimo are going to report this to Varga. And that's when Yuri tells Mimo a story about Vladimir Putin. And he's talking about how his...
Is it specifically about Vladimir Putin? I thought it was just a...
I thought he mentioned Vladimir. I thought he mentioned the full name first. Maybe not. But he mentions this guy Putin, who was a bully on the schoolyard, who learned to lead Nietzsche, all this kind of stuff. And he's talking about how the Soviet way, that the weapon that the Soviet leader will use is disinformation.
Yes.
And misinformation and lies. Again, this is a story instead of a true story is their greatest weapon. And it crossfades to show that he's inside the tractor trailer, which is revealed to be like a reconnaissance room that has its own bunk beds and its own bathroom. And and they got a motorcycle in there. And Yuri's telling this story to Varga. And, Varga's kind of listening to it. And I thought, okay, that's kind of interesting. Because we see that Varga has a portrait of Stalin sitting on his desk in the truck and all this surveillance equipment. And that, disinformation is the weapon of the state. And that's what we have to use. Much like we saw in the cold open of the season when the stubborn Stasi agent was like, I'm not hearing it. That I don't care that you're clearly not 20 years old or your name's not Yuri Gurka or your wife is at home. This is what it says. This is what it is. And so we follow that up, the logic being that Varga goes to visit Emmett. And he trudges across the snow, and they're playing the tune of the wolf as the gray wolf literally comes out of the forest to Emmett's house and knocks on the door. And Emmett answers like, it's dinner. We're eating. What are you doing here? I got pork chop. And he just forces his way in. And he's like, what are you doing? He's like, I don't understand, Mr. Stussy, why you're so obsessed with making me go away when all I want to do is make you rich. And he's like, look around. Look at this place. I am rich, gesturing to the mansion. And he's like,
no, you're not.
No, you're not. No, you're not. And so he goes and they're sitting at the dinette table. His mother's there with a live-in nurse. And Emmett's wife is like, oh, Emmett, I wish you told us we had some guests coming. And Varga's like, oh, it's my fault. The drop-in unattended. And he's like, oh, I'm, and Emmett's like, don't speak of the business in front of the women. And it's just funny he says it that way. And she's like, Emmett, don't be rude. And he's like, oh, yes. Varga pulls out this manila folder and he says he's there to finalized a contract that Emmett wanted him to draw up. And Emmett kind of looks at it and Varga stands up and uses this term, but he's looking for the bathroom. She's like, what? And he's like, he means the
WC.
The WC is how he says it with this weird accent on it. She even's like, are you British? What gave it away? And she's like, oh, she's all delighted that there's a British guy at her table. And so he goes to the bathroom, and while he's gone, Emmett looks at this contract, and his eyes bulge. And we cut to his upstairs office after dinner. He's like, I'm not making you a partner in my company. And he's like, well, you kind of are going to want to. And that's when Varga's talking about the 1%. And he says, look, you think you're rich, but I'm trying to help you out here because you're not. He's like, look at me, Emmett. Look, I'm wearing a $200 suit with a hand-me-down tie. I fly coach. I go to cheap restaurants and cheap motels, and nobody knows that I am rich. He's like, well, you're living in the age of the refugee. All the Mexicans coming across the border to get your women, and plays into this ridiculous far-right conspiracy, we have to blame the immigrants for everything type of thing. He's mentioning the refugees, and you're the age of the refugee.
The age of the immigrant, he says.
No, the age of the refugee, he says.
My mistake.
And he's alluding again, like you mentioned, to that Occupy Wall Street mentality that the mongrel hordes are coming. What are you going to do when the pitchforked peasants show up at your door? What are you doing to protect yourself and your family? Just reeling him in on this stupid shit. And Emmett, being a moron, just is sucking it up. And Varga can tell he's not entirely coming across, so he gestures to the portrait of the donkey on the wall. He's like, is this where you hung it? He's like, what? The stamp. He's like, yeah, it's great. This feud between brothers is very biblical, isn't it? And Emmett's like, how the hell do you know about that? And he's like, and then he goes into this whole soliloquy about he talks about all the different chapters in the Bible or the book of Genesis about the bloody rivalries between brothers, about how one group of brothers sold their other one out to slavery, and Cain, of course, murdered Abel, and blah blah blah. And how Isaac and his sons, and how they said, I was a hairy man, but I am a smooth man. And we see that Varga has been using his surveillance equipment to spy. He even heard he was even listening to, or he had a recording rather of Cy's phone call to Emmett when Varga first showed up at the office. So he's been planning this for a while. And Emmett kind of lets the issue drop about how Varga knows about Ray, and he just kind of allows himself to be drawn into Varga's lecturing about it. And Emmett concedes that, that Cy's right. Ray is a loser. He's like, oh, my brother, we don't have to worry about him. He's just a loser. And Varga's like, well, what of the woman, referring to Nikki? And he's like, well, if my brother's a loser, what more could she be?
Yeah.
And it's like, Emmett, you're taking the wrong thing from this. This guy has barged into your house, lied to your wife, trying to force you into a partnership, which, again, the investment crap is bad enough because he knew that that's why they killed the lawyer, because the lawyer would have been able to put a stop to it. And Emmett and now he's trying to say we're going to be partners and you're going to sign this. And, I'm rich because it's about having a bunch of private jets at a hangar so nobody knows which one to follow where you're actually going. It's having a bunker in Gstaad and all this crap. And Emmett isn't questioning any of it. It's like, this guy could just be an idiot who came off like a tumbleweed off the freeway and is conning you. And again, they mentioned the thing about the Widow Goldfarb, that we should probably take the meeting as to get out from under Varga if it gets worse. And they mentioned her in the first episode as well. So they bring that up again, and Emmett's just not questioning what this Varga guy's about. He's just taking it all in, hook, line, and sinker.
Well, then they do. He does mention briefly that he had gone to the bank and increased the line of credit by $25 million. And Emmett is like, how? And
right.
Varga just says, by being your agent. And
right. But again, Emmett doesn't ask why. Another thing they see at Stussy Lots is that when they mention the part about Yuri being, the blast of the 100 shotguns, he's bringing coffee into the office, and he walks down to the new extension that they have, and they've installed a keypad lock on it, and he notices Cy is looking at him. He stands to block his view, and it's like, Emmett, you and your attorney don't even have access to this huge office expansion where Varga wheeled in all this equipment, and you briefly got a glimpse inside and see all these mainframes and computers, and it's like, you didn't come back after hours to knock the door down by force to see what's going on in there. It's like, you're not going to question how he got your $25 million, you increased your line of credit by $25 million. Like, Cy even picked up on what Varga was alluding to, and he's like, oh, you have a company that it's cash only, you have a limited product, a limited demand, and he's like, hey man, if you start goosing those numbers, and it's like, it's clear what Varga's doing, But Emmett is too stupid to question any of it and is just going along with it.
Greedy. And I did want to say hello to Anti-Derivative Jill.
Hello,
Hey,
Jill.
Jill.
That's the thing. Is it greed or is it stupidity on Emmett's part?
Well, don't forget, at the end of this second episode, they said last week when Vargas was saying, you get it, you're trapped. You are trapped. And he is still offering all of these things to Emmett specifically to sort of, well, I guess his name's on the door, on the letterhead, so you want to take care of him. And by that, I mean, ingratiate yourself or at least imply yourself in the business. And so it is, I think that this is, there's a manipulation involved. And I know that once, like, you can bribe people with power and money and say, this is what we're going to do to you. But ultimately, Vargas has already said last week that you are trapped. We're going to do whatever we want, and you have no say in the matter. I was fearing for people's lives this week. I know we're still not even halfway through the season, but I thought that the traffic lady was going to die. I thought that they were going to go, the hitmen, like the sidekicks, were going to go and take her out in the elevator. I thought that that the old lady or the wife, Emmett's wife, was going to get some sort of negative thing that's happening. Although it was interesting because when he does go to the water closet, I know you mentioned him going to the crapper, but he does go to expressly throw up again. Like, I thought that was messed. But yeah, it's, yeah.
Well, I mean, yes, Emmett's trapped, but is he trapped? Because he has the original contract, which explicitly said that this is a loan, not an investment. Because that's why they killed the lawyers. The lawyer would have been able to nix it. But Emmett and Cy are too stupid to hire another attorney or to you can take this to the cops and say, hey, there's some shit going on here. We think this guy killed our lawyer, and they're not even letting us look at what they're doing, and then this guy went to the bank and increased my line of credit by 25. They could distance themselves from it, but it's like they're choosing to kind of go along with it because they're like hapless idiots or whatever, or cowards. I mean, you literally have a Cossack wandering around the office with that
Switch.
Whatever that is. I'm like, oh, it's just really funny, and it just shows, again, the idiocy. Like, you see Cy in his office with the model of one of the parking lots, and he's playing with it. Yeah. Like, oh, he's moving the train, and he's such a simple guy, as Yuri's just.
He does like a 3-point turn with the little micro machine.
Yeah, with the micro machines, and Yuri's just kind of giving him the look as he's walking by with the coffee, and it's like, these are two completely different. These people are on different planes of existence, and it's just, it's funny.
So once that intimidation tactic sort of persuades Emmett this week, we return to Gloria.
Yes, she goes back home, and she gets a knock on the door when she's about to turn in, and it's Winnie, and she feels bad that, oh, you were about to turn in. She's like, no, it's okay. You want some tea? She's like, yeah. I thought, okay, you realize you're about to turn in, but now you're advancing a line of where you're going to sit down and take time, and it's like, okay, I've had friends like that. But so she comes in and sits down, and she's like, so, I was following up the hit and run thing in the parking lot. And she's like, well, I found out that the one victim of the hit and run, his name was Ray Stussy, and he was the parole officer of the guy who died in the freak AC accident. And his brother, Emmett Stussy, is owner of the parking lot business, whose lawyer is apparently the one who wrecked the brother's car. And we have witnesses placing them in the diner who were talking and having this tense conversation. And get this, the rich brother, lives in Eden Prairie. And she's like, Emmett lived in Eden Valley. She's like, yeah. Or Ennis lived in Eden Valley. And so now she's piecing it together and realizing that Ray has probably done something with his parolee to, because Ray told Gloria when she showed up, he's like, oh yeah, Maurice LeFay, he failed his piss test. I was going to revoke him. And so now she's thinking about that and realizing, aha, you are in a fight. You're in some type of argument with your brother, as confirmed by the witnesses at the diner who saw you arguing with the attorney, who then rammed your car. And you apparently hired it, even though that happened after the murder. It's like there's some ongoing thing here, and you are the one who sent him to do something, and he just went to the wrong fucking place. Like, she's figured it out. She's solved. You can see the wheels turning, that she has basically just solved the mystery, not the motives.
Well, she's seeing the pieces of the puzzle fit together. She has something to go on, and one thing that Gloria is really good about is following up on leads until there is something final.
Yes, and she has pieced it together enough that it's like, okay, now it's like she has the theory. She trusts what Winnie's saying is true. Now she just needs the evidence to prove it.
Well, and it was a nice sort of stylistic touch at the end, because she puts on the tea. They start talking about things, and as soon as it's like, it was in Eden Prairie, and then the steam from the kettle starts whistling, and it's like, oh, and so that's where we cut to black.
Yeah, and a great ending.
Yeah.
So I like that these two episodes, fortuitous that we reviewed them this way, is on the one hand, we're using Thaddeus Mobley's sci-fi story as a parable for that episode, and potentially for things foreshadowing for the season. And now we're seeing, Peter and the Wolf used for this episode, and whether that has, again, obviously it can't be a direct correlation because the character relationships are different than in the story, but you get the basics are kind of there. And so that's kind of interesting to see where that's going to go, or if it's going to go. And it's kind of, and so I like how that's going. And I still love Varga. He's great. Like, the way that he's talking about everything. It's like he stands for all these evil things, but the way he says it is so funny. And so, because again, it'd be easy if he was saying any of this to a smart person, they would just call him out on this bullshit right then and there. But because he has the credibility of potentially being a real bad guy. Like, he told Emmett and Cy, oh, sorry about your lawyer, but I can't have anybody looking into me, which is also something that Cy explicitly said that in this episode, where he's like, the police said it was suicide, but I'm thinking maybe, this Varga fellow, there's no telling what he's going to do.
Yeah.
So he wasn't even willing to say that out loud when Varga first implied that he killed the lawyer, but now Cy is willing to say it because he's seen that these guys have set up shop and aren't going to let him see what they're doing. And it's unclear if there's anybody else in that back room. It might just be Yuri and Mimo.
Yeah, just those three guys.
There's Varga. So that's going on, and that's why Cy has proposed that we should take the meeting with the widow Goldfarb, as they call her, as a bat, which is kind of corrupt. It's like, let's take this meeting with her so we can offload this problem on her, so we'll be in the clear.
Well, and I would assume that it's to bring someone else into, like, safety in numbers. If we bring in the widow Goldfarb, then maybe she has a team of lawyers because our lawyer is dead, and so Cy's no good at it. And he's not he's not a criminal lawyer, so he can't get into that. That was one of the things that the original lawyer was good at. But
it's the fact that he still hasn't hired a new lawyer yet, or even looked for one.
Yeah.
And the fact that also Cy thought it sufficient enough as punishment for what Ray did by going to the bank that, well, I'll just get him fired with this blackmail he had prearranged in case he needed it. Because again, Cy was this, you could tell in that first meeting in the first episodes that Cy was the one getting Emmett to try and push back on giving Ray any more money. Which again just shows the ridiculousness of Cy. Cy, it's not your money. They're brothers. If he wants to give his brother money here and there, it's not really your business. But he thinks of himself as being such a more high and mighty guy because he's, Emmett's attorney. And so, but they still haven't sought out a new lawyer to go through anything. They're just kind of now just along for the ride.
But also, like, there's a lot of push going on from not only Vargas but also from Ray. So they're juggling a bunch of stuff, and then also the specifically timed day that Emmett has. It's 10:30. It's 9. It's supper time. Like, there's all these things. Everything is planned out to make his wife happy. That's why he has to sit outside with Ray last week, and yeah. So I do get how, and also as we've mentioned that they're not necessarily Mensa. So
right, and we see the other parallels with Peter and the Wolf, where Nikki's the cat, and it's like the cat is a bit manipulative and stalking the duck and the bird, and it's like Nikki is the one we've seen is kind of pushing Ray into, like, she didn't think he would go so far as to try and hire a parolee to do all this stuff, but she's the one who keeps saying, "Oh, your cheese done," and even though Ray is still clearly bothered by the murder, she just doesn't really care. And that's again why I think he goes to the bar. It's not so much that he wants to blow her off because he doesn't care. It's that he's really troubled that he just made a major life decision, and it's like, I can't bring myself to go and talk about bridge right now. He's got a bigger problem, much like, and she's kind of nudging Ray, like she nudged Ray to go to the bank, and like the cat is kind of like, whereas the bird's role in Peter and the Wolf is to warn Peter and the cat and the duck about the wolf. And Emmett so far is not doing anything like that. He's just being reeled in by the wolf, like it's no, so that's okay. We'll see if that comes to pass or not, but it's like he's a little bit more hapless than the bird in the story, but still fun.
Well, I am looking forward.
The Soviet motif, by the way, as well. The all the Russian allusions in this season, with again Peter and the Wolf being deliberately drafted as a Soviet children's story to promote Soviet values for children in the Soviet Union.
Well, and that is something that I've noticed with the Fargo, not just at the movie, but the series as well, is that there's always a European element used for different purposes, but there's always something from Europe.
Yes.
Which makes sense, especially considering Minnesota and the accents that are going there. And yeah, there is, I appreciate that all of the, I don't want to say formula, but moving parts are similar, even if they don't necessarily, as you say, line up specifically with the formula of the movie. But all the law enforcement, crime, hapless people, women, men, like obviously there are women and men, but there are, with Rob McElhenney. Yeah, like there's stuff going on, and you can sort of see where the Fargo influence is, which I appreciate.
I didn't pick up on this either, but somebody else mentioned that at the end of the third episode, when Gloria goes to sit on the beach and watch the ocean, that the framing of the shot is the same as the picture from Barton Fink.
Yeah.
That the character's like obsessed over, and like they had the diner from the Big Lebowski, and others said that the entire third episode was basically an extension of the Mike Yanagita scene, because it ultimately has nothing to do with the plot of the overall movie. It's just something that triggered her to go back to Jerry, whereas this is like something that just kind of, we're not really sure how this is going to influence, that whole Odyssey is going to influence Gloria, if it will at all, for the rest of the season. But it's similar to that, and something that seemed useful but really isn't. And so those are other parallels that it's having with the movie.
Well, and but also I think that it was a nice sort of a side, like again, a side story, not necessarily in with the full story, but it's nice when you're watching a show or a movie and you do get to learn more about the emotional ties between the person who is driven to go and solve the crime. Like everyone just sort of called Ennis a mean old bastard, and he was a drunk and no one really liked him. But he made my mom happy and before she passed.
Which is something that Vivian said too, right? When Gloria left, she says, he's right. I was a bad person, or I am a bad person, but he wasn't such a good guy either. Even though, from what the flashbacks showed, the only thing he did was that we saw him do that was bad was when he starts beating the guy up. But again, that was a in the moment rage, crime of passion, something. It didn't seem reflective of him as a person overall. But the way she's saying that decades after the fact, where she feels bad about it, but she still felt the need to tell Gloria, well, he wasn't really a very good guy either. Which again, like to your point, that's how other people described him in Minnesota. So I guess there were other things that happened in that time period of the con that we didn't see that maybe also helped influence her belief in that, maybe.
Well, I do want, and I agree, I do want to get to the chat though. We've been neglectful for a little bit because I'm lazy. Lemon says, hellos from one chat entity to another is acceptable to pass over. Thank you. I appreciate that. And here's Mikey Suze 4 with a hello, Sir Lemon and Miss Suze.
Chosen not to pass over.
Eugene says that he agrees. And yeah. And Lemon says, but when I address you, Scotty, focus up. I should. But Lemon also says that they are joking. Thank you so much. Eugene Bird says, "Hello, Mikey. Please tell your cats I said." A lot of cat things going on today.
Yes.
Mikey Susie 4 says to us, I finished binge watching all 3 seasons of The Greatest American Hero, including the one pilot episode from 1986, The Greatest American Heroine. I didn't even know there was a Greatest American Heroine.
I can't say I'm familiar with either.
Oh, The Greatest American Hero. Well, believe it or not, George isn't at home. Leave a message after the beep. You know the theme song to The Greatest American Hero.
I don't think so. I don't think I've heard of this.
Okay. So you got to check it out on YouTube. It's way better. But it's
Okay.
like, believe it or not, I'm walking on air. I
I
never
heard that
thought
song
I could
before. I
be.
didn't know it was
That's totally from. Yeah.
Okay.
Eugene Bird is also a fan of the song. And let's see. Yes, Mikey Suze 4 with Bemidji, Minnesota. That is it. Yeah, absolutely. Flying away on a wing and a prayer. Who could it be? Believe it or not, it's just me. Lemon says the chat is bubbling. That is true. That's from half an hour ago. I told you I was lazy. Eugene says, did we go back a season from last week? We went back a season from 2 weeks ago. Because 2 weeks ago, we finished up season 4. Last week, we started up episodes 1 and 2 of season 3. So, yes.
Yes, because we've already covered seasons 1, 5, 4, and now we're doing 3. Yeah. We're jumping all over the place. But it's an anthology series, so it's okay.
Lemon Pie says AC units fall on people. They do, but you figure that it would be like from vibration from in the middle of winter, and then it would get a bit shaken loose and fall. Not necessarily that
it would just randomly fall. Because those are, I mean, contrary to what they look like as a little kid, I always looked at those things and it's like, how's it sitting up there? It looks like it might fall off at any moment, but they're actually usually pretty secured in. Like you have to, again, be tinkering with it or something to cause it to, just fall out of the window like that.
Right. Lemon Pie says, Eugene, they are covering season 3 after season 4. Yes, and there is appreciation from Eugene. DVB says, don't have to live like a refugee. Oh, my. Oh, right. No, that's Tom Petty.
I do think there is some truth to what Vargas saying about how, because he could be rich, we don't know, because he does, after all, have resources. He has that truck with all that surveillance equipment. We don't know how he managed to plant all these bugs to do this, but it's like he makes a point that I don't look rich. Like I'm not going to have a bunch of people knocking at my door saying, give me money, because I don't feel the need to pay for a 5-star hotel if I'm only going to sleep there. It's like, I'll just stay in a regular motel and nobody's going to bother me because I don't feel the need to be all hoity-toity, in society. And I could still go by as a rich guy and get by just fine.
Well, and he does say that the purpose of wealth, not money, wealth, is to be able to disappear.
Yes, and I think it's also ironic that he's telling him that I don't really value, because I'm trying to disappear and being invisible with my money, but his plan seems to be, like he keeps telling Emmett, is to make us all rich. And so It's like, well, is he rich already, or is he just bullshitting and he's not? It's like, well, it's kind of interesting. So we'll see where that goes. But
yes,
I do like that motif where he's saying that, you don't have to present yourself as, it's not necessarily the smartest thing, even in any time period, to go around presenting yourself as being super rich. You might get kidnapped for ransom or something like that, or whatever, or like who's gonna burgle Emmett Stussey's house? But Emmett Stussey, he's got a big mansion. That sounds,
But I think that's the fear that Vargas is trying to instill on him, is that you can have your mansion and people will come for you. They'll be here with their pitchforks and torches and they're coming, but real wealth and power.
Yeah, and Emmett tried to defend it by saying, "But I just make money. I just make parking lot money. That's all this is." And he's like, "Do you think the mongrel hordes are going to differentiate, or they're going to care?" And I remember that. And when he says that, I flash back to that moment in Dark Knight Rises at Scarecrow's Kangaroo Court, where they're putting a guy on trial, not for the crime of enabling the terrorists to take over the city with a nuclear bomb. No, we're putting on trial for the crime of working in a construction company. And and being in a slightly higher position, which is common sense as a company. You have somebody running the damn company. But that's what that type of socialist, what a socialist revolution is. They just
Yeah.
demonize everybody. And that's what
Yeah.
Vargas,
The people who have stuff are the enemy, even though everyone wants stuff. DVB is very proud of the use of the word soliloquy. I believe that was in reference to Vargas. Jill is here again.
Varga.
Hello.
Not Vargas.
Varga.
There will
My
be plenty
mistake.
more soliloquies this season.
And DVB asking if Jill is all healed up.
And
Jill
did something happen?
Oh yeah, no, there was a car chase. There was an accident. It was all Michael Bay and stuff. The front fell off her car with the assistance of a very drowsy elderly woman. It's been all over the news.
Jesus, I didn't hear about this. It's horrible.
Well, no, she's fine. She's better. Things are working out. And she says she's feeling better every day. She thinks.
Well, good. I just heard about this. This is crazy. I'm trying to picture. You mentioned a Michael Bay car chase with Jill. I'm like, what? But okay, happy you're okay, and that it's just a old lady falling asleep, which is bad enough. Behind the wheel.
And Jill says he must be out, or he'd pick up the phone. Where could? Oh, I must be out, or I'd pick up the phone. Where could I be? I have no idea about the show. I only know it because of Seinfeld. Yeah, no, I remember it as a kid. And Mikey Suze4, I'd like to find out whether or not it was good. Like, I remember it being marketed. I watched a YouTube retrospective on it, and they were talking about it and saying it was like they were really leaning into the comedy, but it's not that much of a comedy. And they were leaning into this superhero stuff, but there's not, like, I don't know. I haven't seen an episode of that show since it first aired, and I think I only saw 2. Lemon Pie finishes up with, believe it or not, George isn't at home. And Jill says, fortunately, there were no explosions.
Yeah, if this were a Hollywood car accident, it would be devastating. But this is not a Hollywood accident. This is a real life accident. Which fortunately are not as devastating, at least most of the time, for fender benders. Whereas in Hollywood, if a car has a fender bender, there might be an explosion. Unless there's some explicit narrative reason for there not to be one, then they will most certainly have an explosion.
But I can say, I can say very firmly for myself that I'm happy that you didn't explode, Jill.
Yes, absolutely.
And a reminder for everybody to go and subscribe to Antiderivative Jill's channel. She'll be doing a shore leave tomorrow. Earlier than usual, but she does Tuesday shows for Star Trek the original series, yeah, generally one of the most awesome people I know. But I think that's that'll bring us to the end of the chat.
All right.
Is there anything that you would like to promote or plug or anything? I saw that you have a thing going on with Positive Fandom talking about the post Oscars.
Yes, we will be recapping the Oscars tomorrow night at 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 Eastern, on the Positive Fandom YouTube channel. I assume it will simulcast on the Bur Network as well, as is typical with the shows that I'm on with RM. And we'll just recap the Oscars. It'll be fun.
Nice, fantastic. I'm trying to remember what I have to do. I'll probably be on Jill's channel talking about Way to Eden. Hey brother, for the original series on Tuesday. And then aside from that, I don't know, whatever I want, I'll do stuff, I'm sure. So is there anything else, or should we just meet back here next Thursday?
Well, we will meet back here next Thursday. Oh, and we did find out the last little tidbit that the reason the stamp was worth a lot of money is because it was a misprint where the 2 on one of the corners was printed backwards. Something else that Varga now knows, which is okay. Because that's another thing is I know nothing about stamp collecting. I know that's a huge thing for people, but that's not something for me. And right. I couldn't figure. They never explained why this stamp was worth a lot of money, but now thanks to Varga, we know it's a misprint on the number 2. And I do happen to know that the cast, when they wrapped, wanted to get like a tattoo, like for the season. All of them would get the same one, and they were going to do the stamp, but they realized that didn't really apply to all the characters, and they eventually couldn't make up their mind about what would apply to all the characters, so they didn't do it.
Makes sense. But thank you. I forgot to mention the misprint on the stamp. It's kind of like a buffalo nickel kind of thing. The valuable treasure. It's a MacGuffin of sorts. But I did want to say thank you to DVB for being here. It's always a pleasure. Thank you, Lemon. It's always great to see you, Lemon. And Eugene Bird, of course. Thank you again so much for your generous support. We appreciate it. And then also Lemon Pie said that $12.99 of that is earmarked for Twinkies for Scotty, which is true. I do need Twinkies. And it was a pleasure to see Herc 130, Suzanne Eckstein. Was fantastic to see you here as well. DJ Play Nice for bumping the algorithm. Edge of Time, huzzah. And Mikey Suze 4, thank you again. And of course, Anti-Derivative Jill. Thanks everybody for hanging out. Anybody who was lurking, appreciate it. And don't forget to like and subscribe, share, tell your friends if they're Fargo fans. Pretty soon we're going to be taking a detour, but not until after we're done season 3. So I am looking forward to every Thursday. Jill says for the Way to Eden, I cannot wait for the Pointless Hippie episode. I can't wait for the Pointless Hippies. And Lemon says, thank you, Scotty and Kat. My pleasure. Our pleasure.
Absolutely.
So yeah, I guess we'll do this again next week.
Yep, next week, same time. For the 5th and 6th episodes of Fargo season 3, we'll be crossing the halfway point.
Outstanding. And still, with a season left after that, we're gonna have a fantastic time, and I've really enjoyed hanging out in Fargo with you. Have you been having a good time?
Absolutely, this is great.
You forgot the sign-off catchphrase.
Oh yeah, you betcha.